Hey, we're back with the Real Conversation Show. This is Christopher Robinson with our special guest, Mr. Alton Edmond. Thank you again for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I want to get right into it with the Black Lives Matter tie. One of the things I want to get your response from is when I watched the interview on television, the intro to the entire story is the controversial tie. How do you respond to the very idea, before we even have the conversation about it, the very idea that the tie would be controversial?
Well,
because it is to a lot of people.
right, it is to a lot of people, and I think that's really a bad spin of the media. I don't know what the agenda is, and why the media spins it that way. But there's a segment of the population that has taken the bad acts of some people that do certain things in the name of Black Lives Matter, the Black Lives Matter movement, and those things are not cool, things that I don't agree with. So damaging property, fighting, hurting people, that's not something I approve of. Now, as far as I know, there's been no Black Lives Matter murders or anything like that. And so, but a lot of people, because of, the fact that a very small population of people, some of their actions, looting and things like that, some have labeled the Black Lives Matter movement as a terrorist, terrorist organization or something like that. And it makes no sense to me because, when I hear the phrase Black Lives Matter, that is not an exclusive phrase. It doesn't say only Black Lives Matter. It doesn't say just Black Lives Matter. It just says Black Lives Matter, which means that you can say Black Lives Matter and white lives still matter, and Asian lives still matter, and Muslim lives still matter, and women's lives still matter. Those things are not mutually exclusive. But a lot of people that really spin Black Lives Matter in an ugly way really hold on to some belief or some idea that Black Lives Matter means that other lives don't, and that's absolutely false as far as I know. The way that I believe and what I mean when I say Black Lives Matter is really essentially that Black Lives Matter too, or at least they should.
And do you personally have any affiliation with the organization?
No. I just, in 2016, I saw a lot of things going on. Just to backtrack a little bit, I was in law school at the time that Trayvon Martin was murdered. I was in law school in Orlando. He was murdered in Sanford, 30 minutes from where I live. And so when a lot of these things, a lot of these police shootings start becoming very public, I was training myself to be, a litigation specialist, to be an attorney. And so, I think that the time that I went to law school was pivotal in my growth and development and developing some of my views in terms of, different movements that I support. And I think that's one of the reasons why Black Lives Matter really hit home for me, because I saw a lot of this injustice, going on right in my own city, right in my own area when I was in law school. And many of the law students from my school marched upon the courthouse right there in Orange County when everything happened.
So I ask you about the tie itself in the office.
Right.
Because I think when I put myself in that situation, right, it's a bold move. And I just imagine standing in front of the mirror in the morning, tying it, it takes me forever to figure out how to tie a tie. So I'd really have to look at it. But you see yourself, and what is going through your mind the first day you wear it, as you're putting it on in the morning. How do you feel the day is going to go?
Well, I think nothing of it. And nothing happened, the first day, second day. I mean, I wore it I wore it maybe once a week for several months
Okay.
before there was ever any issue.
Because I'm sorry to interrupt you, because that wasn't clear also.
Right. No,
Whether-
that was never specified. Fox News left that out of their
Okay.
spin.
Because I had the impression that you showed up and everybody was like, whoa.
First day I wore it.
Yeah,
No.
controversial tie.
No.
No, okay.
No, and there are a lot of people involved that saw the tie and that saw me wear it over the course of time. You know, there were court deputies that saw me wear the tie. There's a judge that saw me wear the tie. And in terms of, there's another media spin, there's another narrative in this story where different people are saying, you know, that tie has no business in court, has no place in court. Well, Blaze Tredis, no one else has the authority to tell a judge what to do in their courtroom. You know, Florida law really gives judges a lot of discretion to determine what is allowable in their courtrooms and what is not. And if a judge had ever said to me not to wear a Black Lives Matter tie in their courtroom, I would have refrained from doing so. But there was never a problem. Like I said, I wore the tie for months, and there were a few occasions where I went to court, never before a jury, but there were a few occasions when I went to court, addressed the judge, and had on my tie, and he saw me with my tie on and never said a word because it wasn't an issue for him. Maybe he didn't look at the tie and see some of the craziness that other people see when they see that message. Maybe he understands. I can't assume for him, but maybe he understood, you know, that, you know, Black Lives Matter really just means that they matter too. Like,
so nobody said anything? It didn't spark conversation? I mean, if you're, I don't know, standing by there's not lockers. I'm sure there's probably a place where people congregate.
I remember.
And it, yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to ask. And it didn't spark any conversations?
I remember 3 conversations about my tie. I remember one day I was heading into the Brevard County Courthouse out in Vieira, and a sheriff's deputy at the door as I was going in complimented my tie. He said, "It's a nice tie." I remember once when I was in court, a deputy complimented my tie and said, you know, well, I'll just quote what the deputy said, you know, "Take a lot of balls to wear that tie here." You know, because, you know, that deputy understands the atmosphere in Brevard County and, you know, it being overwhelmingly conservative. And so, you know, it seemed to be something that garnered respect from at least the few court staff that I encountered that noticed the tie. But there was one other conversation that happened in my office. I was walking one day to the restroom casually, and I passed a secretary in the office. Not my secretary, a different secretary in the office. Her name was Dawn, I believe. And she looked at my tie, and she said, "All lives matter." And it sparked a conversation. And so I said to her, "Yeah, I agree." However, you know, everyone isn't experiencing, you know, unarmed shootings at the rates that Black people are. You know, not everyone is experiencing incarceration at the rates that Black people are. There's clearly a problem, you know, going on in this country. And the problem is so bad that, one, myself, I'm led to believe that Black people are not treated as if they matter in this country sometimes, you know, a lot of times. And that's really what Black Lives Matter is all about. And, you know, I explained that to her, very calm demeanor, no screaming, no yelling, nothing like that. And, you know, she didn't agree with me. She didn't disagree. She didn't.
So, like, how did the disagreement go as far as?
There wasn't really a disagreement. She didn't render an opinion that, she didn't render a counter opinion of value. Her stance was that not white lives, but that all lives matter. But, you know, she really couldn't explain what her problem with Black Lives Matter was. And so after I finished explaining what it stood for, you know, the conversation just kind of trailed off, and I went back to my office and went about my business. She's really the only person that I remember having a conversation with in the office about my tie. And so, I believe that she's probably the person that told Mr. Tredis about it and the reason why he mentioned it later. Because when the gun incident happened, Mr. Tredis called me to his office and he mentioned the tie as well. But the conversation with Dawn happened maybe a month before the gun incident. And so he just addressed them both at the same time. He didn't call me to the office separately for those two things.
So do you think, and I'll be upfront and I'd say that I'm not a conservative politically, and I don't have a problem saying my political views. But do you think for someone who has that view of the Black Lives Matter movement, right, and sees the gun on the desk and has the things that they already have in their mind, do you think that it was a actual security concern on the part of someone who, watches things that are on the news and has a fearful or concerned view about that organization, to see someone that is making that kind of a statement and then the gun being on the desk? Do you think that's where that concern came from, or do you think it was something else?
I wouldn't say that those things were associated at all, because when my weapon was discovered on my desk, my weapon was discovered on my desk on December 2nd. The conversation about Black Lives Matter was maybe a month before with a different person, not the person that discovered. I know her name is Tony, I believe, but not Dawn. And so this is a different person that discovered my weapon, someone that I never had a conversation with about Black Lives Matter. And so I don't know what her views were on Black Lives Matter. And I had been working in that office since April. The gun was discovered, or the weapon was discovered. The weapon was discovered 8 months later in December, after I'd been working there for 8 months. And so people, generally knew who I was. I'm that guy that comes into work early singing a song, with a smile on his face. That's the person I became known as. And so I don't understand why, I don't see a connection between those two. Just when I think about my representation and what people seem to think of me in that office.
Okay, so how, and to talk about the office, how does the rapport feel at the office? Because earlier you had said that there is political talk that goes back and forth that happens around the office, and the woman who told you all lives matter, that was unprompted. You were just walking by, and that sort of thing was just said to you.
Right.
So overall, was there a hostile sort of air in the office, or was it an environment where you felt like you could say what you wanted to say and have comfortable conversations, cordial conversations, even if you disagreed with those around you?
I think that certain people had cordial conversations about, and it was comfortable to talk about politics, but it was only comfortable to talk about politics a lot of time with people that had agreeing viewpoints. Because, someone that disagreed with my viewpoint printed out my Facebook status and gave it to Blaze Tredis. So, clearly there isn't a respect for opposing viewpoints by some people at that office. But, there were some people at the office that, I had, many conversations with about different things. And it was never an issue because most of the people in that office were pretty liberal in their views. There were really only a few people that were really, really, really conservative. And it seems as if those people were the people that were, reporting people for having certain conversations and things like that. Those were the people that had the strongest views, the really conservative people. Mr. Tredis was front row at one of Trump's rallies when he went to the Orlando airport. You know how much front row VIP tickets cost to a Trump rally?
No idea.
I don't know, but I imagine they cost a lot.
Now, earlier you were saying that the conservative viewpoint is dominant within the office, but now you just said that most of the people in the office are liberal. Are you saying is that at a certain level within the office, or how do those two things sort of coexist?
Most of the people in the office are liberal. However, the conservative people are more outspoken about their views. And so it's more dominant because of that. You know, there is one gentleman who also happened to be one of the armed gentlemen that escorted me out of the office when I was fired, Dale. He all the time would talk about his conservative views and, you know, about this and about that. And he would post during work hours, after work hours, before work hours, about all of his conservative views. And it was never a problem.
Okay, so I was going to ask you about that. Two things that the last sentence brought up for me was, number one, is being escorted out by multiple armed people a normal firing procedure? I mean, I don't know if you were there long enough to see people be fired.
I've never seen anyone fired, but I've had conversations with people since I was let go. And my understanding is that they've never seen anyone fired or let go from the office. Period. And that's especially troubling. And, you know, I don't know the veracity of that, but that's especially troubling because there are people in that office who picked up DUIs while they were working for the office. DUI is a crime. You can go to jail for a year. Well, depending upon how many DUIs you have. But you can go to jail for, 60 days. You can go to jail for, 100, depending upon, how many DUIs you have. You can get a substantial chunk of jail time for DUI. There are people in the office that had DUIs while they worked for the office and they were not fired. They're still working there now. There were people in the office that picked up battery domestic violence charges against their spouses. They can't even legally carry a weapon because domestic violence battery is one of those crimes where if you're convicted of it, your gun ownership rights are stripped for life. There are people in the office that cannot legally carry a weapon. They still work there. But I was fired.
Okay.
That raises issues.
All right, so on that, we're going to take another break. We will see you back for the last section of our interview with Mr. Alton Edmond.